Hi, Sheila.
All right. It looks like we're live. Uh, Good afternoon, good morning, good night, wherever you are, right? Especially if you're James here, my guest today on MSP webinars. James, it is tomorrow.
It's tomorrow. Welcome to the
J-
world of tomorrow, Steve.
James is here from the future. James. Where are you at right now? You're in Australia, right?
I'm in Sydney.
Yes,
Yep.
he is in Sydney, which for
Yep.
those of you that are geographically challenged, that is in Australia.
That is, it happens to be in the east coast of Australia. Yeah. Yep.
So this is the second time I've had James on here. The first time he spoke to us about Benchmark 365, the outsourcing company that you created. And James, I'm glad to have you back here, man.
It's good to be back, Steve.
Now, today, James, I mean, let's be honest. At the end of the day, this is kind of like going to be a 60-minute sales pitch for Benchmark 365. We're not going to tiptoe around that, right? But you're going to get some good information here. And if you want to achieve the infinite scale like James is going to discuss today, one great way you can do that is by outsourcing your help desk or your knock or a combination of both to a provider like Benchmark 365 or to Benchmark 365. So let's just kind of dive in. You sent me a few months back this really fantastic little book, and it's kind of it's interesting. Yeah, infinite scale. It's really interesting, all of the stuff that you have in here, even just about your, I didn't expect it to be like the life story of James Vickery. And it kind of is, but in a way that helps tell the story of how you learned how to scale things. So you started your first IT company, I Know IT, back in 2003.
Yep.
And that had to be scary, man. How old were you?
I was 23.
You were younger than me when I started my MSP. I was
Yeah.
25. It's scary starting a company that young, especially because if you're like me, I bet you didn't really know what you were doing when it comes to running the business. You were probably great at tech, or
Yeah.
at least kind of good at tech, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But when it comes to running a company, I mean, there's things that we never think about. When I'm complaining about the boss, right? Why doesn't the boss just go get us the software we need?
Yeah.
Oh, this software costs tens of thousands of dollars. That's why. Oh, apparently, companies don't have a surplus of hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars just hanging out in a checking account, waiting for the employees to say, "We need this."
That's right.
And you learn that when you start your own company.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of other hard lessons.
So let's. I kind of want to dive into the financial aspect for a minute,
Okay.
because I feel like that's one of the things that's kind of like a rude awakening for us business owners. I think I see here, your third day of work, you're making $10,000, like easy money, right? But then you realize it might not be a few weeks before you get your next gig.
That's right.
So week two, you've spent your 10 grand by week two, right? You
Yeah. Well, you've spent 9,000 of it on hardware and for the actual $10,000 deal, right? But when you're young and starting out, it just seems like a huge amount of money until you have to start
Oh,
distributing.
absolutely.
Yeah. So
It seems fantastic. It's like this is great. Why don't I do this more often? Because it's hard. so people get excited thinking, "Oh man, I just made $10,000," but you didn't just make $10,000. I
yeah,
mean, if you're doing it right, your company just made 3,500,
yeah,
unless the whole deal is just service. and you're doing service. But still, I mean, you got to pay bills. You know,
That's
you're
right.
going to have costs of goods sold for something. You're going to have expenses for the business, and that's things that, you know, the new business owner don't think about.
Totally true. Yeah, so that was my experience starting out. Is I had a screwdriver. I knew a little bit about IT. I wouldn't really proclaim that I was an expert because I didn't have the exposure at 23 to all of the different corporate environments, all of the different infrastructures. And I think I'm like a lot of MSPs out there, that I basically learned as I went along. And in the early days, people are excited to work with you because you're young and fresh faced and probably a little cheaper than the competition that they've been working with. And so you square off a few gigs and you're like, I know how to do this. And then the reality of scaling sets in, right? And you realize that you can't be in all places at once. So you start this journey of employing people. And that vector alone is what actually is probably the hardest vector in business by far, is the recruiting, training, retaining, dealing with staff. And so, yeah, I guess in a lot of ways, talking about the financial side, when we look at financials of MSPs, a lot of the time, there's a very, very heavy line item, which is staffing. And yet it's also the number one complaint from most MSP owners, that they can't get the utilization from their staff, or they can't get John to show up at work on time, or they can't get Mary to answer the phone in the right, script that they've set up for the company or whatever, right? So it's a huge challenge. And for me, that was like 10 years of like down the rabbit hole, trying to get good at that side of things.
And I got to say, John and Mary are literally the worst. So you also talk about this big mistake you made with your construction customer. Can you talk about that? Because I think that's an important lesson that some of us have not yet learned, and I think it'd be better if you just told us that lesson instead of learning it ourselves.
Yeah. So as the business started to grow and we started to acquire some clients, one of my clients said to me, look, I was working from home. He said, look, why don't you come and set up in our office? And I said, oh, well, I can't afford the rent and blah, blah. He said, no, don't worry about it. You just do our IT and look after the staff here with their IT problems, and we'll give you an office space. And
it's a win-win.
A win-win, right? Except that at that time they were about 10 people, and by the time we were done with them, moved in, and they scaled. They were more like 60 or 70 people, right? And all of a sudden we're having these tough conversations because, I employed people, and, they were getting a tap on the shoulder every 5 minutes from one staff member or another that was having an email problem or a lob app problem or whatever. And so that ultimately didn't end well. It was actually a really big turning point, though. It was the time that I decided it was time to stand on my own 2 feet and get a proper office space and separate ourselves from them. Ironically, they went broke during the global financial crisis, so it was good to kind of get out of there before we went down with it. Yeah. But that's one of many missteps that happened in the early days of my MSP.
So you also had a eureka moment. What was that like? What was the event or experience? Was it the construction company that was your eureka moment?
Yeah,
or was there a different one?
That was a different one, yeah. So there's been a few of those. It's good. Thank you for reminding me of some of the horrible experiences.
I'm sorry, I think.
Look, so about 10 years into running an MSP, we'd grown the business. I mean, we had, what I would consider to be pretty good revenue. But we just had this constant 2 steps forward, 2 steps back is probably the best way to describe it. So, you win a client and you're really excited. You get this new MSP customer on board, and out the back somewhere you lose a client, which I talk about a lot in the book. We call that the leaky bucket syndrome of running an MSP. So that's not always your fault. If we've had clients that have gone under. We've had clients that have merged and corporate IT have taken over the management of the IT infrastructure. We've had all sorts of reasons why clients leave, and I'm sure your audience has as well. But that doesn't make life any easier when I've just reached this, next milestone. Maybe you've put an extra, X $1,000s of revenue on the books, and all of a sudden you lose one of your other clients. And so we were constantly like hovering around this same revenue, just could not break through. Sometimes we would go back quite a bit and then we would jump forward again. And it was like this business, we always talk about scale. Everybody talks, we're going to scale. I couldn't see how it was possible. I couldn't see how we could continue to have this back and forth with our revenue and scale a business. So that was problem number one. Problem number two was, we're in Sydney. We're in a really aggressive market. And having started Benchmark, there are a lot of very aggressive markets that we're familiar with now, where you would employ someone and you would train them up and give them the skills to work in your business, and they'd be great. And then a bigger company would come along and offer them something much bigger, and kudos to them, great, but not great for your MSP, right? Because you've put all the effort into hiring that person. And so we had these two constants, constant problems with staffing and constant problems with scaling due to customer attrition. And one day, a friend of mine said, hey, why don't you take a trip? We're going to do a business tour over in the Philippines and learn about how companies scale up. And I was like, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work in our industry. It's not going to work. But I wanted to get the hell out of Sydney for a while. So I was at the airport and I'm sitting with a couple of MSP buddies. I was in HTG at the time, and we're all sitting there ready to go on this tour. And I get the dreaded phone call from the largest customer to say that their site is down. And it was like, oh, that's okay. We had a great level 3 guy. I'll call him. I'll make sure that he's on site, get this sorted out, blah, blah, blah. And call the office, and my level 3 guys are away sick and uncontactable. And the remainder of the team did not know how to fix this particularly complex TS issue that was going on for this client. And so there I am at this critical juncture. I'm the only other person that knows maybe how to solve this problem, but yet I'm trying to go overseas to develop my business. And so I made a decision to go and to go overseas. And that was the toughest, and I mean the toughest flight of my life, because the whole while, and I'm sure many people who are watching this have been through this, you're thinking about, what if the team doesn't solve the problem? What if the client decides they're going to terminate the contract? What if, just overwhelming anxiety. This is a 9-hour flight to Manila. And when I land, my phone is just peppered with texts saying, get here now, and the site's still down, and just a disaster. And so I said,
you're reminding me of all the reasons. Oh, and you guys, I just want to make sure you realize, James, those thoughts are like 1,000 times worse when you're the only guy.
Totally.
You don't have a team that can hopefully stumble their way through.
That's right. Yeah, and if you are a solo player, you've got to both manage the relationship side and you've got to be the tech as well, and that's a huge, huge challenge. And for me, it was amplified by the fact that, hang on a second, I'm paying all of these staff and they can't solve the problem either. So it was like, it was a really big issue. So here's the mindset, that just setting the scene. that's the mindset that I'm landing in a country in the middle of nowhere for me at the time. And I'm walking in with this mindset of, I'm going to lose this customer. I'm having problems with staff. Our business isn't growing. What am I going to do? And that really, I suppose that was the eureka moment, is that I started touring businesses and I saw legal firms, accounting firms, manufacturing companies, obviously call centers, companies with thousands and thousands and thousands of staff, right? Like thousands of staff. I think one of the organizations over there has 100,000 employees, right? That does telecommunications stuff. And so here I am with my 4 or 5 people and going, how did these guys scale? Like, how did they do it? How did they scale? How did they get their business to grow? And so I kind of learnt from that. I started to talk to those owners of those businesses, and I started to kind of jot some notes down. And that moment in my head was, what have I actually got to lose by trying something different? Everyone in our industry is doing the same thing, and we're all following this methodology. The methodology is not working. But the methodology wasn't working. And, sometimes I think when we're in these IT communities, and I think it's great that we have such a robust community in our industry, but sometimes it's an echo chamber, and in that echo chamber, you're talking to your peers, and often the conversation turns to tech. And often the conversation is, we're doing really great because we've just bought ConnectWise, or we've just bought Autotask, or we've just done this, or we've just done that. And you know what? That's great that you've done that, but it's not growing your business. It's not scaling your business. And so, sorry, Phil.
No, and I was just going to say, people always say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So if you want something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done.
Yeah, agree.
And you did it.
Yeah.
So what was that? What was that like? So what I guess what I'm wondering is when you first decided I'm gonna try something different, was that decision I'm going to outsource to another company, or did you actually rent space, hire a bunch of people, and that was your team? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so I don't know how much time we have for James's horrible mistakes. We could do a whole webinar on everything that I've done wrong. But
I mean, we don't have to go into the details, but I am curious, how did things progress through from at that time? And what do you remember what year that was?
Yeah, that was 2012. 2012.
Okay, so 2012 to now, what is kind of the big picture of what steps did you take? When were things still for I know IT, and when did you split things off and start reselling these services?
Good question. And this is again something that I cover in the book, is that we ran the full gambit of all of the different ways that you can outsource. And there's a guide in the book to help people determine what's right for them. So, I know we talked about, maybe this is some promotion for Benchmark, but there's more than one way to skin the cat, right? And, one of them, for example, is freelancing. So you could go on Upwork and you could say, I want a level 1 technician or a level 2 technician, and you can hire that person and roll the dice with that. I've done that. Problem with that particular model is that there's no loyalty in Upwork or any of these platforms. They're usually doing freelance work between other priorities. They usually have other clients. They don't often kind of gel with the culture, all of those sort of things. But we tried that, and that didn't work. We tried going direct and hiring people at home, and that didn't work because of the technical limitations and the logistics around all of that, management, supervisory functions that need to be in place. in an overseas country. So that didn't work. And eventually we settled on recruiting and managing our own people. And so in terms of your timeline, probably 2012 to 2014 is just sitting in the weeds. And sort of 2015 and onwards, really starting to, hit stride, me flying to the Philippines every couple of weeks, living over there for a period of time, hauling my family over there for periods of time, and getting really good at building a company, like not just freelancing the odd job here and there, but actually building a company with a culture, with loyal staff, and with all of the mechanisms in place to manage a team over there as well. And whilst that was hitting its stride, I came to realize something else, which we talk about in the book as well, is that IT people really suck at sales. And
we certainly do. And you talk about that too. Even how sometimes we fudge the numbers a bit.
Yeah.
How big are you? How many staff have you got?
Yeah, there's a lot of that. and
I got 7. How many people are in Zoom right now?
Yeah. And do you know what's interesting is that that kind of turning point, I started to just do what every technical person does, and I started to just focus and hone in on process and started to focus on the tech side of the outsourcing. And then I realized, these companies around me that have scaled to 100 people, 1,000 people, more, they focus on sales. They focus on sales growth. And as they reach milestones in sales, they invest in their business. They invest in processes. They invest in marketing. And they invest in the things that are needed to kind of keep the engine going and growing to the next level of scale. And so there I am in whatever point, 2014, and I'm like, well, this is great. I've cut my costs down by offshoring, but I'm not getting any new business because I'm no good at sales. So I had to turn my attention, just like when I first started my business, I had to be good at tech to get some runs on the board. Now I realize my job is to actually focus on sales and get good at that. And so there's guidance on that in the book on how I and we went about that, so that all of our energy went into the whole picture, not just, the next widget, the next piece of automation in the business. It was like, let's get leads in the business and let's fill that leaky bucket up, knowing full well in our industry that it's a game of up and down, right? There are some things that are beyond your control, but one thing is for sure, every client that you've got right now, one of them is going to go at some point. One of them is going to go, whether it's your fault or their fault, and you are going to take a revenue hit, whether you like it or not, and you can beg, plead, send cupcakes, pop around with a bottle of wine, you can do whatever you like. At some point, market dynamics say that you're going to lose a client. And so your job as an MSP owner, particularly if you're small, is to focus on that 80-20 rule, and 80% of your time should be spent on sales. 80% owners, repeat that again, 80% of your time should be spent on sales. You should not be touching tech.
So that's a lot of time.
That's a lot of time. But that's the leaky bucket. And so, when we talk about scale, I go to these MSP events. I go and talk to people all the time. They say, James, I want to scale. I want to scale. I want to scale. It's got to be one of the top buzzwords in our industry, scale, scale, scale. And so I think it's important to understand that you cannot scale without sales. You cannot scale. You can put every tool that you can find into your business. You cannot scale without a steady stream of leads and opportunities coming through to your business. It's not possible. And so that's really what infinite scale is about. It's not about outsourcing. Outsourcing is an enabler, right? If you can get your team under control, if every time that phone rings, there's someone there to pick it up, if every time that ticket comes through, there's someone there to triage it and resolve it, then that 80%, that 80-20 becomes quite possible, right? Whereas if you're spending 80% of your time wrangling, what names did we cut? John and Mary. If you're wrangling John and Mary, 80% of your time, your business isn't growing. And that's the reality, and you cannot hit scale. when you're in that situation.
And, I'm actually doing something. I'm in the process of outsourcing something I've never done. Something I've never outsourced, I should say. I'm in the process of outsourcing all of my bookkeeping.
Awesome.
Now, accounting, sure. I mean, no, like the actual accountant piece with doing the taxes and that type of stuff, sure. But the day-to-day bookkeeping, I'm outsourcing that because I have enough. Now that I have basically like 3 lines of business, I've got the MSP, I've got the website design, and now I've got MSP webinars, and it's becoming too much to juggle. Just figuring out where all the money's coming and going is becoming too much to juggle. Let alone do all of that plus the work plus go out and sell.
Exactly.
So, I am also learning that sometimes you just need to go out and sell or outsource something to enable you to be able to go out and get the work that you want to be able to do. I'm probably doing it a little differently. I'm not outsourcing the service side or the work. I'm simply outsourcing the things that I don't want to do. Because I like doing the technical stuff. I like going out and solving weird problems. I don't like being in QuickBooks for 3 hours every week.
That's right.
Sad. And I don't like to be sad.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what you're doing there. That's what we call building momentum. So that 3 hours that you're spending bookkeeping, you can now divert that to something more strategic in your business. And for you, that's spending more time delivering these webinars. It's perhaps spending more time on some of the higher end technical functions in your business, whatever that is for you. For a lot of our partners at Benchmark, we actually have tracked this. And we find that after they outsource to Benchmark, there's obviously that kind of like early teething stage of that sort of 90 days of onboarding and pilot that we do with all of our partners. Not 90 days of onboarding, much shorter onboarding, but 90 days to customer success is what we refer to it. And what we found is once they get over that initial phase of, hey, I'm not running around, scrambling around, fixing stuff anymore, once they focus on sales, their businesses grow dramatically. And we have a few case studies on our website where they've doubled revenues in 6 to 12 months. Their focus has changed. They're out seeing their clients. They're not out seeing their clients saying, I'm here to fix X. They're out seeing their clients exploring additional opportunities with that client. And that's just an amazing thing to see. So you build momentum. And I did the same thing as you. I outsourced my bookkeeping as a first step, and then I outsourced the phones. So I had the phones go to a third party. That was the next step. Then I started to build this team up and so on. And today, my role is more around the execution piece of strategy, right? It's not about getting distracted by an email or a phone call and saying, oh, I can't do any sales today because of that. So yeah, I think you're on the right path.
It's been fun for me.
Very good.
It has. I'm enjoying this, and now I'm trying to figure out what do I want to outsource next. I think, but I'm also like, I know if I try and outsource too much at once, that I won't be able to get team A to do everything the way I need them to do it, because I'm also working on team B, team C, team D. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Because as you outsource, I mean, you're not going to use the same people to do your accounting as you outsource your phones or your graphic design or that type of stuff. So you're going to have to have different teams. So
yeah,
I have some questions about outsourcing with Benchmark 365. So you have your team in the Philippines.
correct.
Okay, so they're help desk or knock?
Both.
Okay. And NOC, for those of you that maybe are unfamiliar, Network Operations Center, what would you have the NOC be doing for a company like mine?
Yeah, so without knowing the ins and outs of your company, but most MSPs have an RMM platform that they're using, usually underutilizing. They're receiving alerts at all hours of the day saying, hey, check this on this server, or hey, this server's down, or hey, annoying noise ticket that is completely meaningless and doesn't deliver any value to you or your client. So Benchmark takes all of that noise off your table and manages those alerts and manages the RMM for you. And it's a BYO situation, so we don't dictate. I know there are some outsourcers out there that sort of force you down a particular stack.
Yeah, they do.
Say again?
They do. I learned that a year or two ago. There's actually some, they're like, we only work with Autotask. I'm like, okay, well.
Yeah.
You're pigeonholing yourself, but at the same time, you're also making yourselves Autotask experts. So I can't blame them.
Yeah. Look, I think you've got to decide, what fits right for you. But for us, we found that although MSPs talk a lot about stack, they make a lot of compromises along the way, and we don't see ourselves as coming along and saying, well, you must use this tool or that tool. We see ourselves as underpinning your expertise. So you are the MSP, you are the expert, you know your clients, you know your products. And what we do is we assign you a team, and they'll have familiarity with those platforms. And we will work the way that you work. And we won't dictate what tools you work with. We may say to you, look, from an operational efficiency perspective, this ticket's taking 5 hours because you've decided to use this platform, and that's having a cost, that's putting a cost burden on your business, it's putting a labor burden on your business. Why don't we try this or that instead? And so these are kind of like natural conversations that we have with our partners, but we've never dictated at all what tool to use. And to be quite honest, and I know you do a lot of webinars, Steve, there really isn't that much variation in the market. I mean, there are a few main players that must have about 80%, 90% of the market wrapped up with their tools. And then there are a few obscure ones out there that probably may not survive actually, or they're gonna grow and dominate at some point. But really, the majority of MSPs use the same stack out there.
And what I find so interesting is if you look, like, people don't realize that some of these different companies are all owned by the same venture capitalist firm. So ConnectWise, isn't it ConnectWise just got purchased? And they're owned by the same company that owns Continuum. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to do anything crazy between the two. I'm just simply saying that there's fewer players in the industry than people even realize, with all the VC funds that are out there.
Yeah, it does seem like there's a lot of activity at the moment, and it's got to make you wonder who is the product, right? So I think when a venture capital firm is buying up almost everything in sight, they obviously see the channel as a very powerful thing for them, one way or another. Benchmark's privately owned, just full disclosure there, and there's no back of house funding from anyone. So, and I think that's kept us really, really close with our partners. Like, we're still going through the same things that they are, but we work together hand in hand. So we still have, I know IT is still around. We're still a growing MSP in Australia, using the model, using Benchmark as the support behind I know IT. And I think it's great to be able to talk to our partners and be able to relate to them and say, we have a business in your space, We're seeing the same challenges. We're having the same conversations with clients. We're seeing the same disruption from cloud and software as a service. We're seeing the same disruption in terms of compliance that's happening in our industry. And it's good to be able to actually relate. It's something I really, really enjoy doing.
So I want to talk to you about the people at your knock and help desk. First of all, I'm gonna spitfire some things, and I basically just want you to tell me if you do it or not, and then which team would do it: the help desk, the knock, or if there's another team. Help! My computer won't turn on.
Help desk.
Okay. Obviously, if boots need to be on the ground, you'll spit that back to us, the provider. But the help desk would be the initial one. I'm not able to get any email. Outlook says disconnected.
Help desk.
Help desk goes through and they determine it's a problem on the client's Exchange server.
It's still help desk, but at a higher level within the help desk. So I know we're spitfiring, but just quickly, what we do is we assign you a team that handles your MSP. So that's comprised of level 1, level 2, level 3, dispatch, everything that you would either have already in your MSP or anything that you would dream of having in terms of like a ready-to-go team that knows your stack and knows your customers and gets to work just like you do. And so the majority of what we receive gets assigned to that team. And then, of course, there are changing shifts because we're 24/7. So if that then evolves into Exchange is down and someone needs to dive in and troubleshoot, whatever, that would be a knock team that would handle that. But it's a how do I explain this? It's much the same as what you would expect within your own organization. So sometimes these things are a group effort. Most of the time they're handled by the appropriate engineer with that skill set.
And I have a method to my madness, so it'll all hopefully become clear here. You, the MSP, wants to deploy a new Exchange server, upgrading them from 2008 to 2016 or whatever.
Yep. So we have a project services team for that. And there are two ways to go about it. One is that you can engage Benchmark to fully scope out that project and come back to you and say, this is what we think you need to bill your customer for this piece of work, or this is the hours involved in this piece of work, or you scope it out and we work to your scope of work. And it's just, you define the budget, you define how much is involved. I just want to put in there, when we engage a partner at Benchmark, we start with help desk because we like to intuitively get to know your business, you, and then projects come later. And we have a dedicated team for that.
Insert RMM tool here has detected that the server is low on hard drive space. There's an alert, a ticket's been generated, etc.
Yeah, so freeing up hard disk space I would say still sits within the help desk. I wouldn't see that as specifically a knock. Maybe knock picks it up, but it's assigned to a help desk resource to do what they need to do.
So so since you have help desk, so is help desk and knock all kind of like one thing, or is the knock actually a separate service?
It's all one thing, so we don't differentiate between ticket types on that at that level. So the way we look at it is, you're an MSP, you have a volume of work. Most MSPs are comprised of a certain percentage of knock, a certain percentage of level 1 type work, a certain percentage of level 2, a certain percentage of level 3, a certain percentage of change. Right? Every MSP that I've encountered, in the last few years on this journey, some vectors are higher than others. So some do a lot of proactive support. Some are break fix, very reactive support. To us, it's actually just about getting the job done and working to your standards.
Like it.
Yeah.
So my customer calls me for support and they press 1 for support. And I imagine that's going to redirect to your help desk team.
Correct.
So, and this is going to sound terrible, but this is what we assume here in the States. Ping ping from Philippines is going to answer the phone, and they're not going to know how to say the name, spell the name, or how to communicate because there's different dialect, different accent. Maybe they even use English differently, right? Because I mean, they're not going to answer the phone and sound like Jim from California.
Some actually do, but
Okay.
we talked about this a lot on the last webinar and a couple of years gone by since that one. But the Philippines has been, was almost effectively occupied by the United States for a long time, decades. And so what happened there is we ended up with, schools being built with an American focus, companies like large communications companies setting up shop in the Philippines. And today you've got, everything from KPMG to insert telco company here, all based out of the Philippines, all having significant teams. And so a lot of the dialect actually mirrors a US accent, which is funny because I'm Australian and you would think that would maybe be a challenge here, but it's really not. So in terms of accents, I don't find that's an issue at all. In terms of comprehension, we make sure that we hire people that have either perhaps worked for those large companies, so they've been doing that kind of work for a long time, maybe 10 years. They've gotten quite accustomed to working with people in different parts of the world. And so we make sure that we're always hiring the best possible people with the best possible accents and the best possible comprehension, and then the expertise underpinning that as well. So, and we don't have any pings at all.
I couldn't think, like, if it were Indian, we always think of names, but I was like, oh crap, Philippines. I don't know any names for the Philippines, so I just made one up.
Do you know what customers want? Do you want to know what customers want and what I've found most MSPs sometimes struggle to understand is they don't want you. They want their
problem. Want their shit to work. That's what they want.
And they want it
in my French.
Yeah. And so, like, I think one of the worries is, I'm going to use the Philippines or India or the Ukraine or whatever. Like, you've decided that you're going to outsource, and there's this fear that the client's going to say, look, I don't like talking to Sanjay because Sanjay's got an accent. You know what? They don't give rats at all about that. If that individual solves their problem and does it fairly quickly, they don't have an issue with it at all. What you have in every MSP is a level of exception. So there are some things, and you would know this quite well, Steve, whether you got staff or not, there are some things where your client will deliberately bypass you and go to you because they feel like it's too complicated to explain to one of your employees or to the help desk. They feel like it's too complicated. And you know what? Sometimes they're right. Sometimes it's some basket case piece of technology sitting in the back of the warehouse somewhere that only you know about because when you were young and silly and started an MSP, you set it up for them or you got good at it, right? And so there are certain things that, you call a help desk and you throw some curveball like that at them. Of course, there's going to be some challenges. It's got nothing to do with it being offshore. Like your new level 1 in America would have the same problem dealing with it and you'd get the same level of complaint. And so what's important is understanding that there's no perfect way to deal with customers. But what we do know is that 99% of stuff that comes through is a 2-minute, 5-minute, 10-minute turnaround, and they won't even remember. If you call them up a week later and say, how did you go with that password reset? They'd be like, man, I don't remember what you're talking about. It's not important to me.
So I want to continue to dispel some of the weird thoughts that people have with outsourcing. Okay, so stick with me here for another moment. So in the Philippines, they earn pesos, correct?
Mm-hmm.
They don't earn dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So what have you found is like the average wage for somebody in the Philippines?
Yeah, well, it's going up a lot. I think you'll find that there's a band of somewhere between, $1,000 to $3,000 to $4,000 per month for a resource, and you're going to get varying skills in there. So minimum wage is like 500 pesos a day or something, which is about $10 US, $10 to $12 US. You're not going to be hiring those guys. So people get stars in their eyes and say, I've just found someone on Upwork that's going to work for $4 an hour or something. You got to have a think about where that person's at in life, right? Where they live, whether they've got access to facilities, whether they've got an education, whether all of that. So you've got like a market that's quite mature there now of very entry level people that we love to develop them, and we've built a training organization to help develop people in the Philippines and give back. And we would start at that point, at that sort of entry level. But for anyone that want like looking after your clients and infrastructure, these are far more mature, well-paid, middle-class staff. Yeah.
So what do those guys earn on average per whatever day or something US?
Yeah, well, that's in those ranges. So you might start with a level one of you might be, yeah, you know what? I actually don't have an answer for you because it's so different depending on what you're looking for. But yeah, you might be in that kind of, 50,
I meant for you at Benchmark. I'm not asking for people to reinvent the wheel, and I also want to give the caveat to people. Just because this is what his one person costs, that doesn't tell you how many people he has working for him and any of the other infrastructure. So
well, and I don't have any concern about that. I'm just actually struggling to put my mind to salaries. But the reality is that as we talk about in the book, it's a game of scale, and one thing that does not work in the Philippines is a like for like situation. So, in the States or in Australia or the UK, you might hire a level one resource and that person wears many hats. It doesn't work like that over there. They follow a specific discipline. And so what we learned in those hard years of trying to grow my MSP and then eventually starting Benchmark is that we actually needed like 3 times as many people, because we had to have people cover different bases. So you do need people overseeing quality. You do need supervisors. You do need people. You need redundancy for people to answer the phones. It's not acceptable to have like gaps in your delivery, right? And so that's going back to your point. Yeah, I think you'll find salaries range between that 1,000 and 3,000 a month, and it's a sliding scale depending on skill set, experience. Can you get it cheaper? Yes. Can you go regional? I mean, you can look at the southern part of the Philippines, and you could probably halve that, but then you run into skills gaps quite a bit, or you run into infrastructure issues quite a bit. So companies that are serious tend to gravitate towards the bigger cities, and the bigger cities command higher salaries.
And okay, so for 3,000 pesos a month.
No, we're in dollars now, not pesos. Peso, that would be nothing. Yeah.
I was going to say 3,000 pesos. No. So you're paying these guys $57 a month? Like, holy cow. Okay. So you're paying your people not much less than what we're paying our people.
Yes, as I said, it's a scale. So if you're looking to hire a dispatcher, someone to answer the calls and look after your Autotask or ConnectWise or whatever. I'd say the ranges in the United States sort of sit somewhere between like 25 grand to 60 grand a year for, varying levels of skills. So in the Philippines, it would be a fraction of that. You'd probably be paying, half to midway of the lower scale to hire dispatch resources. But the other thing to point out, Steve, that a lot of people don't understand about the Philippines is they have significantly more vacation days than the United States. Certainly in the United States, you poor guys don't get much at all. In Australia,
I took a vacation last year.
That's good. How many hours?
Yeah, it was like 3 days. And I just took another one for 2 days.
Yeah, that's really cool. So the Philippines have a ton of religious holidays. They have a ton of leave days, and then on top of that, they have challenges that you and I don't have. So they might have a logistical problem getting to work, for example, that because the infrastructure is not there in certain places where they live. And so when someone's hiring someone, they're like, great, I just scored a gun tech for 20 grand a year or less. You have to also add up like how many hours, what's the actual utilization, and often it's a little less than the States, or quite a bit less than the States. So what we do at Benchmark is that we don't, all of that back end of hiring and HR and days off and sick leave and all of that BS, that's actually our problem. You're not actually hiring, we're not transferring the challenge over to you there. What we do is we base it on volume, and if one of our people's away because they slipped on a banana peel and couldn't make it to work, we have someone else there ready to take on that function. And that, Steve, that's scale. That's what scale means, is that your business runs tickety-boo 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you're not like, sorry, we've had to drop our level of service because Fred's away today. That's the biggest.
No good.
Yeah,
that's no good.
Yeah.
So talk to me about Infinite Edge. That's a company in Europe you helped, right?
Yeah, Infinite Edge. Really, very grateful for having met Martin, the CEO of Infinite Edge, a few years back. I was sort of toying with the idea of starting an outsourced help desk. And this is what happens, by the way, if you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking about another business, is that you get dragged back into your existing kind of business. This happens all the time. So I don't know how many ideas people have for a new business, but because it's not generating revenue and leads and this and that, what happens is something pops up in your MSP and you end up going back down the rabbit hole and into that, and that other business doesn't grow. And so fortuitously, Martin came along a few years back, called me up. He heard about the fact that we had a large team in the Philippines. And he said, look, man, I'm an MSP. You don't have to talk to me. You don't have to help me, but just want to share with you that I've been running this business for several years. I haven't had a vacation. It hasn't hit where I want it to go. And, I've got a young child at home and I really want to take my family away on a vacation. And he said, can I leverage your team and pay you for it, of course, and I'll go and have a vacation. We'll come back and we'll talk about how it all went. And so I agreed to it, and we kind of came up with I guess what we refer to now as a pilot. So we set some parameters around it. And Martin said, great, and he diverted his phones and emails to us and disappeared for like a month. And so all of a sudden we had I think we had a reasonable customer base, and all of a sudden we're fielding calls from all these different companies around Australia, and we had to provide support. And so you can imagine that was like really challenging for us, and really awesome for Martin, because he was off gallivanting around in Europe somewhere with his family. But it was an amazing experience for us, because first thing we learned is we're actually really good at what we do. And so there are very few IT things that pop up and solve. That's the first thing we learned. Second thing we learned is that because Martin wasn't scaled up, his clients actually thought that the service was better because the phone always got answered, like every single time. Whereas before he was running around and he was busy and he was fixing computers and he was going to meetings. And so the phone, I won't say never got answered, but it didn't get answered when, as frequently as it should. And
that is awesome.
All of a sudden his clients are like, well, that was awesome. Every time I call, I get an answer and someone logs on and, fixes the issue. We also learned some hard lessons. Documentation was a big challenge. We didn't have all the resources that we needed to do our job. So we had to do a lot of troubleshooting that drove a lot of time up. And we tell our partners that today that, we can go live. We can do this like Martin did. But it's just going to drive inefficiency rather than efficiency. And so the more we can work together during onboarding to align documentation, the better. And so Martin came back and he just became this huge promoter for Benchmark, so much so that he's ended up in the book as a story in there. We're really, really thankful. He's still a partner today, still growing. His business doubled in size in that first 12 months. He learned that he could take time away and that his business grows when he's away, which is a really amazing thing. And so, kudos to Martin. Big thank you to Martin.
So what would you say that we as MSP business owners need to do before we can infinitely scale? And I would say that the biggest part of infinitely scaling is getting the service down and utilizing a company like yours. So what do we need to do before we can outsource to you, James?
You know what? You need to, if for those that haven't, it's a mindset shift. And it's one that I went through and have some gray hair to prove it, right? Is that we often think as technical people that the next step is the tool, that we're going to buy or that we're going to implement, or the agent that we're going to roll out, or the customization we're going to do in our workflow, or the blah, 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 blah. I hear it over and over and over again that I've just got to do this and I've just got to do that and I've just got to do that and then I can scale. But the truth is that the way to scale and the way to grow your business is through sales. And you need to get good at that because you've been looking into this box for the last, for me, it was 10 years. For others, it's been even longer, 20 years. Looking into the box for the answers aren't in the box. The answers are out there talking to customers. The answers are out there at trade shows. The answers are out there at events. The answers are out there making a video to promote your business. That's where the answer is. And so you can optimize as much as you like. You can document as much as you like. If you're not focused on sales, your MSP is not going to grow. So that to me, that is my number one piece of advice. It's in the book. It's in everything that I talk about. From a practical standpoint to grow your business, you need to recognize that in order to grow, you cannot be the one doing everything. You cannot be in the middle of everything. I just explained to you, Steve, before we went live that that something's happened in our family and I've taken some time off work, and I couldn't do that if I didn't entrust people within my organization to step in and actually run those tasks, right? And so what we tend to do when we're small business owners is we tend to oversee and jump in and micromanage, and we want to take over the ticket, or we want to advise all the time on what to do. But ultimately, you need to be able to let go in order to have that 80-20 perspective, 80% of your time focused on marketing and sales, 20% of your time tending to, the culture or tending to some of the processes in your business. Right. So they're the two key things, is that you need to have that mindset shift. You really do. Then when you get into the practicality of it, you need to understand that whether you hire an employee, whether you hire a freelancer, whether you hire a staff member overseas, whether you work with Benchmark, you need to give it some time, and you need to spend that time gelling with whoever it is that you're working with. And so we take our clients through, our partners through a journey. As I mentioned before, it's 90 days of customer success. We expect there to be some friction in the early stages. We expect it to really smooth out if we work together as partners and if the partner is actively communicating with their clients and staff as well. And so, yeah, I don't know if that covers it, but they're my three things to scale.
Well, James, this was awesome, man. I really appreciate it. For those of you that are interested in outsourcing your help desk and knock and eventually some projects, check out benchmark365.com. James wrote an awesome book called Infinite Scale. James, how can somebody get a copy of that book?
Well, you know what? I know these are live, and you've got a few people on the webinar. So if they anyone that's live with us right now, if you send an email through to hello@benchmark365.com, I'm going to send you a copy myself. And I know this is going to go. It's going to be on YouTube, and then people are going to still be wanting that copy. So I tell you what, anyone that emails me between now and, why don't I say Monday? And that's Monday, the 1st of April, April Fool's Day. If you get in touch with me before then, hello@benchmark365.com. I'll send you a copy myself of the book.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, hey, thanks, James, so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks to everyone that was here live, and thanks to everyone watching this in the future, along with James from the future. It's now 5 a.m?
It's 5 a.m. now, man, and it's time for me to either have more coffee or go back to bed.
Have more coffee, James. You won't be able to scale if you go back to bed. All right.
Absolute pleasure, man. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
You all have yourselves a fantastic day, and I'll see you on the next webinar.